Coming up on this week's episode of Hip Hop Now podcast, we talk about the most important and probably the best year in hip hop, 1988.
Let's get right to business.
Read these headlines. This album must be gone. This album must be gone.
Classic album.
Come to Hip Hop Podcast.
What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast Extra, a podcast designed to catch you up on all things hip hop music and culture that happen throughout the week. I do appreciate the new listeners who are coming through, and definitely the OGs who have been here with me since day one. I appreciate the love. I appreciate people retweeting, sharing, reposting, whatever it may be. But please know that is really the only way that this podcast can continue is when you share it with people you know would also enjoy this kind of content. And, I'm just proud to bring it to people. You know what I'm saying? A lot of big things happening in 2018 for this podcast. Also know I started this last month, and next week we're going to play our second edition, but we started a listener profile where we profile you, the listener. We give you an opportunity to talk about hip hop, and it's very simple. Basically, we email you 3 questions. You record yourself, audio only. I don't need to see you. I mean, it's cool, you want to send a picture or whatever, but I really don't need to see you. But you basically will answer 3 simple questions. I'm going to give you the questions right now so maybe you can get it together. Audio only, though. The first question would be, what was your first experience with hip-hop? The second question, what's your hip-hop guilty pleasure? And the third question being, what are your top 3 hip-hop artists or top 3 hip-hop albums of all time and why? You, of course, will record yourself answering those questions, give your name and where you're from. And I definitely will try to get everyone in. This is a once a month thing right now because I don't want to get to the point where if I get too little, I've already used everything out because I'm going every week. Or if I get too many, maybe I'll go to a bi-weekly system. But for right now, it's once a month. Tune in for that. Also, just to let you know, the email address from which you can email your audio answering those questions to is vegasworld5@gmail.com. That's vegasworld5@gmail.com. Today, we're talking about 1988, so let's get right into the business of the things at hand. Big shout out to a couple of places where I did some research. Obviously, I'm old enough to have been around in 1988. I believe I was 11 in 1988. And, I was already a huge hip hop fan prior to that. 1988 was an unbelievable year for hip hop and music in general. But we're going to talk about hip hop. But in music in general, when you look up all of the now classic albums that dropped in that one year, it is unprecedented. And for hip hop, it kind of laid the groundwork for what would happen in the early 90s with Death Row and what would happen with the whole East Coast renaissance of Wu-Tang and Black Moon and Nas. But 1988, and like other years, but especially 1988 was a year where a lot of debut albums came out, a lot of classic legends and all kinds of stuff just dropped all on the same year. And it's just unbelievable. You would think that if you were to do a little history on 80s hip hop, you run across a number of classic records, you would be blown away at how much of that came out in one year. Now, I know there's some people out there who like to call the early 90s, specifically the East Coast early 90s, the golden era of hip hop. It's almost impossible. because when you think about a year like 1988, and I'm going to go over damn near all the albums today, when you think about a year like 1988 and how much came out in that year alone, we're not counting what came out in 87 or 86 or even 89. Just that year alone, it's a lot. But when you look at the 90s, that era that, some people like to refer to as the golden era, a lot of those people I named, like Nas, Biggie, Wu-Tang, Black Moon, and all of that, they all came out 93, 94, 95. You know what I'm saying? They didn't all drop the same year. So that's what makes 1988 a really, really special time in hip-hop. A lot of groundbreaking, aggressive hip-hop, aggressive lyrically, aggressive with the beats, East Coast, West Coast, all of that. This is not a countdown of, what was the best or the top, whatever. This is just straight up showing homage to the albums that came out. So let's talk about a couple, man. One album in particular that dropped in 1988, Straight Out the Jungle by the Jungle Brothers. And when I tell you, hold up, let me get myself straight, make sure I got everything that needs to be up here. When I tell you about a album that dropped and just contains so many classic joints on it, like, you know what I'm saying? I think that's what people tend to miss, because people tend to forget about the Jungle Brothers. It's a little scary when you think about it. You know what I'm saying? It's like the Jungle Brothers was a classic group, Native Tongue. You know what I'm saying? I don't believe Native Tongue was happening at that time, but if you don't know, Native Tongue was De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest, Jungle Brothers. I think it also included like Moni Love and Queen Latifah. Back in the days, the crew thing was really big. It was really big. But a couple of songs, that appeared on this 1988 classic, Straight Out the Jungle, On the Run, Because I Got It Like That. I remember back in the days when Because I Got It Like That used to come on the radio all the time. All the time. People don't realize today how big the Jungle Brothers were. They were so big to the point where they could even do a house record, and it was dope. I used to love Girl, I House You. But obviously a classic album that, again, doesn't get a lot of props today. But I think it is imperative that you go back and check it out and see what's what. One of my favorite hip hop groups of all time is EPMD, and they dropped their debut album in 1988 entitled Strictly Business. Two rappers who also were producers. The songs on here, man, complete classic, Strictly Business. You Got to Chill. You know what I'm saying? They're just some of the dopest hip hop back in the days. They had the dope dancers. There was a time where people, I guess, were comparing them to Rakim because of their flow. But nevertheless, just, you know what's crazy about EPMD? Let me say this. Production. You know what I'm saying? Because EPMD had the rhymes. They had the look with the, the buckets, but back then they called them fisherman hats. Just a dope crew, you know what I'm saying? And when you go back and look at it, man, with the flat tops and all of that, it's just ridiculous. We got to keep going because there's a lot of music in 1988. You want to know what else came out in 1988? Boogie Down Productions, By All Means Necessary. If you don't know which album cover that is, that's the joint where KRS-One is peeking out the window like Malcolm X, but instead of holding an AK-47, I think that's what Malcolm X was holding, he's holding a Uzi with the BDP leather jacket on and hat. This was after their debut album. This was Boogie Down Productions' sophomore album, but it also was after the death or the murder of Scott LaRock, DJ Scott LaRock, who was a big part of BDP as a DJ, as a producer. And when Scott LaRock died, you kind of felt like BDP was over, because you got to understand, for the youngins, the DJ was kind of really like the biggest thing in the group, to be honest. Because the DJ was usually the one who produced all the records, so he was like the backbone, and the rapper was like the feature to the DJ. That's kind of how it used to be before a time where the rapper kind of moved up front of the DJ, and rappers producing all that good stuff. But on this album, and I believe this was the first video, My Philosophy, the way they would switch to acapella versions and switch back to the beat, I love, to this day, is one of the dopest videos of all time. Also on the album, I'm Still Number One, You're Slipping, Stop the Violence, we know about that one. I believe that's Self-Destruction, right? Yeah. Boogie Down Productions became, or KRS-One became, even more conscious than ever. And it worked, man. A classic album, classics depth. Another sophomore album that dropped in 1988 to follow up probably the greatest, if not one of the greatest, hip-hop albums of all time. Eric B. and Rakim hit the scene early on in the 80s, not that early, but earlier on in the 80s with Paid in Full. But in 1988, they dropped Follow the Leader. And people wondered, could they do it again? And they kind of did, because this not only had Follow the Leader and lyrics of Fury, but it had probably hands down, probably even above Eric B. as President for me, Microphone Fiend. That track with Rakim's lyrics, I was a fiend before I became a teen. Like, I melted microphones instead of cones of ice cream. Like, now, there are people out there who's like, damn, well, that's simple. Like, that's some Little Yachty rhymes. You know what I'm saying? No, it is not. You know why? Because no one, probably besides KRS-One, was really dealing with wordplay on a level that Rakim was. He had his rivals, like Kane, but they had a different style. And Microphone Fiend was just one of the dopest hip-hop anthems as it relates to MCs of all time. I mean, even when I hear it to this day, it's still dope. A debut album that dropped in 1988 that was very close to myself because I'm from Brooklyn, New York, was Big Daddy Kane's Long Live the Kane. Way too many classics on here. Raw, Set It Off, Ain't No Half Steppin', Long Live the Kane. Like, Just Rhyming with Biz. Unbelievable, just ridiculous amounts of classics on this album. I mean, I remember playing this album to death, and I didn't even have money for it. I had to get a copy, but I just remember playing it so much that I just idolized Kane. Like, I remember, back in the day, watching Video Music Box on public access. I couldn't wait for Ain't No Half Steppin' video to come on. I couldn't wait. Yo, I thought that joint was coming on after every video. I felt I would be upset if a show would pass without that video being played. And at one point, I wasn't disappointed. It was played like every time that show came on. But Kane was that infectious, because where Rakim was more of a, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but more of a slowly prodding lyricist where, his moves are more calculated. So he takes his time, you know what I'm saying? Whereas Kane was more rapid fire wordplay, you know what I'm saying? Like, put it this way. Here's a gun analogy. Rakim was more like a shotgun, whereas Big Daddy Kane was more like a Uzi. Both can do some serious damage, but they're delivering that damage in different ways. You get what I'm saying? And Kane, again, because I was from Brooklyn, I was just so attached to what he did, man. And it It was dope. Now you see 1988 is already crazy, but we're not done yet. Ultramatic MCs dropped their album Critical Beatdown in 1988 also, featuring Ego Trippin', Ease Back, Watch Me Now, Funky. Ultramagnetic MCs in New York, when they dropped this album, all over the radio. Like DJs would scratch these records all the time. You know what I'm saying? And I remember in the beginning, I didn't know who the hell they were. I knew their songs, but I didn't put two and two together. You know what I'm saying? Because, again, in 1988, so much dope music was dropping that not only were the singles in rotation, but B-sides were in rotation and other deeper album cuts were in rotation. So it was a thing where you're talking about a couple of albums already being in rotation along with singles that are also dropping. Because, again, we're really only talking about hip-hop albums that dropped in 1988. Classic record. Everything I named so far is a classic. Do not get it twisted. Another one that's really close and near and dear to my heart, Slick Rick's The Great Adventures of Slick Rick. This was Slick Rick's debut album on Def Jam. This was the album he really got a chance to work on before he went to prison. He also worked on, I believe, two others, The Ruler's Back and Behind Bars. But you can obviously tell they were running out of juice. So it doesn't have, those other two albums don't have the same attention to them that his debut did, The Great Adventures of Slick Rick. An album cover that Nas tried to duplicate on Stillmatic, but it was kind of crazy with the pigeon next to him. I didn't get that part. But whatever. On this album, I mean, I could name standout cuts, but I'll just be going down the entire track listing. But Mona Lisa, The Ruler's Back, Hey Young World, Children's Story, Davy Crockett, The Moment I Feared. I mean, and this is the other thing. This is the key. When you hear people talk about Slick Rick and they talk about him as if he's the ultimate, well, he is to me, but they speak about him as if he's the ultimate storyteller. He is, because it was his storytelling that influenced some of the greatest storytellers in hip hop, including Biggie, who was probably really close to being second because his stories used to always be dope. But see, this album here that also dropped in 1988, The Great Adventures of Slick Rick, it was all stories. Every track was a story. That is not an easy thing to do. It's very easy to get on a track and just boast and ramble because you really don't have to have any direction. Some back then called it freestyling. It's easier to do that because there's no focus. But to tell a story, that takes a little bit more thought. To tell a story that's funny and play different characters and change up your voice and here and there and add elements. Slick Rick, man. And he dropped this also in 1988 with all that other music I just said, which is kind of crazy. Another album that dropped that, some youngsters wind up learning about, NWA's Straight Outta Compton, the most dangerous rap group in the world. I thought people didn't curse in rap music until I heard NWA. Now I know there's some old head back there who know, well, Schooly D, and I know, but you got to understand, I was 11, fam. Part of me was watching cartoons. The other part of me was hip hop and school and trying to eat candy and stuff like that. All right. So I didn't have any time to do any research, but I knew NWA straight off the break was something different, something otherworldly when it comes to hip hop. You know what I'm saying? Because it just told me that, on the West Coast, they just got guns out and they got gangs and they drink and they dress in all black and they say F the police. I mean, F the police on this album, Gangsta Gangsta, Express Yourself, Straight Outta Compton. The videos felt dangerous. it was just so dope. And this was the other thing. NWA didn't sound like anyone else. That's the key to all of these albums that are all dropping in 1988, is that nobody sounded like nobody. And a lot of these cats are from the same areas. You know what I'm saying? But no one, you never really felt like, and again, I know I said the whole EPMD thing, but when I first heard EPMD, I never felt like, yo, they trying to sound like Rakim. I just thought they were dope too. Another album that dropped in 1988, Ice-T's Power. Probably more famous for the cover than it is for the actual music, but it was a dope album. Features records like I'm Your Pusher, Power, High Rollers, Personal, Drama. But the cover though had, I believe this was his first wife on the cover, and she had that bathing suit on, man. I'm looking at it right now. And she was holding, the shotgun in one hand. Just really dope cover for gangster rap. Ice-T, one of the pioneers for gangster rap, without a doubt. Another album, and this is probably, I saved this one, not necessarily for last, because I got some other ones here. But I'm going to try to make this podcast a little bit, in range of what people are used to. But Public Enemy's It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back also came out in 1988. This is the quintessential, if I can do that on a hip hop podcast, conscious hip hop album. For me, personally, this is close to being my greatest hip hop album of all time. Personally, I have some that I like more, don't get me wrong, but this album in particular did something to me before some of my other favorite albums, which would come in the 90s, did. It spoke to me as a young black male at the age of 11, and it spoke about so much stuff. I felt like Chuck D was telling me everything I shouldn't do and everything about myself I should be proud of. Obviously, there would be other rappers to do the same, and other icons like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and Marcus Garvey and Medgar Evers. Let's not forget them. But I was a hip hop fan, and I grew up in the ghetto, and things that were street related to me more because it was my time. I always say this, about 1988 in general. Like when you look at, for example, y'all know I'm a boxing fan. You look at Mike Tyson, right? Mike Tyson was so big to us in Brooklyn, in New York City, and more importantly, across the nation because of one major thing, in my opinion. He was kind of like hip hop. You know what I'm saying? And I don't mean like he was our age. He was older than me, but he was our age. He was from our generation. And when he cleaned out the heavyweight division, that was a past generation. Like you go look at the boxes that Mike Tyson was beating as he became the undisputed champion. You look at him, it looked like he knocking out the 70s. You know what I'm saying? Because they got the thick mustache, no beard. You know what I'm saying? They fight a certain way, and Mike Tyson was just ferocious, and it felt like hip hop. And I felt like Public Enemy had that same energy with the Bomb Squad doing the beats. Records like Rebel Without a Pause, Bring the Noise, Don't Believe the Hype, Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos. And Chuck D would just be going in. 1988, y'all. Powerful hip hop music, and more importantly, a counterpart to what NWA was doing with Straight Outta Compton, because Straight Outta Compton was the angry ghetto, a new generation tired of abuse, but we're going to take more of the Malcolm route. Malcolm, before he changed his views, but we're going to be a little bit more aggressive. We're tired, we're angry, we're fed up. Whereas Public Enemy had all the same emotions, but decided to just speak against injustice and educate us young hip hop fans. This was all 1988, y'all. All of this. 1 year. Not a span of years. Not 93, 94, 95, 96. Not 97, 98. Not 2000 to 2003. You know what I'm saying? Where people try to say certain eras are better or the golden era and stuff like that. But all the classics that come out of them come out of a span of like 5 years in some cases. This is 1 year. What if you put 87 in 89 and you tack that onto there? There's even more classics in there. But this was all 1 year. And it included a ton of debuts from legends in hip hop, producing legendary albums, and in some cases, teenagers. You know what I'm saying? I hear sometimes people say, "Oh, well, you know, the mumble rap, it's cool. They teenagers, man. They don't really know much about the world." Are you serious? You know how long in hip hop teenagers provided us with some of the best music of all time? Just to make that clear, not to rant, but let's go over a couple of quick joints, you know, when it comes to albums that dropped in 88. We're just going to name some of these because we're not finished. You thought I was finished, though, right? You thought I was finished, but I am not. MC Light's Light as a Rock also dropped in 1988. Paper Thin, 10% Diss, I Cram to Understand You. Eazy-E's Easy Does It. You watched the movie. You heard him kick Boys in the Hood. That was in 1988 when he dropped that. How about this? You heard of the legendary Juice Crew, Marley Marl, MC Shan, Big Daddy Kane, Kool G Rap, Roxanne Shante, Master Ace, Craig G, Biz Markie. I believe he was a part of the Juice Crew as well, even though like the compilations he didn't. But Marley Marl dropped Marley Marl In Control Volume 1, which has undoubtedly one of the greatest posse cuts of all time in Symphony. Come on now. Come on. You know what it is. Biz Markie's debut came out, Going Off. We know he had ghostwriters, but it's fine. All of the hits he had, probably damn near all of the hits he's ever had, are all on his album, including Nobody Beats the Biz, Make the Music with Your Mouth, Vapors. Come on, man. Too Short. Too Short dropped in 1988 with Life Is. I Ain't Trippin', Nobody Does It Better, Cuss Words, the title track, Life Is. Run DMC dropped Tougher Than Leather. And a record that if you hear it today, still crazy. Now, I love Run's House, which is on this album, Tougher Than Leather. But they also had Beats to the Rhyme on here. And my God, that beat and the way Run is flowing on that track, ridiculous. Shout out to Philly, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. He's the DJ, I'm the Rapper album also dropped in 1988, featuring tracks like As We Go, Here We Go Again, Time to Chill, and one of my favorite, Brand New Funk, where when I first heard that, I didn't even know he was from Philly. You know what I'm saying? I was just like, yo, this cat is dope too. I always assumed everybody was from New York because that was the majority. I knew the West Coast cats were from the West Coast because they had the Jerry curls because we were rocking flat tops. But I just knew West Coast and New York until I discovered, oh, the Fresh Prince, he's out of Philly. It's kind of dope. You know what I'm saying? Who else dropped in 1988? Super Lover C and Casanova Rudd. You know what I'm saying? One of the dopest records of all time for me as a kid, just hearing it on the radio all the time, was Do the James. Stetson Sonic dropped their album, In Full Gear. Also, 1988. Sally, Talking All That Jazz, Pen and Paper. You know what I'm saying? King T dropped that year with, I believe this was his debut album, Act a Fool. Also in 1988. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on to the point where you're like, all right, well, those are the classics. We all know that. They all dropped in 1988. What else you got? I mean, the album wasn't great, but it was a Brooklyn anthem. The audio, too. Milk D. You know what I'm saying? The name of the album was What More Can I Say? But what was more important was Top Billin', which became an anthem for Brooklyn because these brothers was out of Brooklyn. Also, I Don't Care was dope. Couple of other joints, that dropped in 1988. I'm not going to get too deep into them, but Dougie Fresh is the world's greatest entertainer. Rob Bass and DJ Easy Rock, It Takes Two. That record just will not die. Salt and Peppers, Assault with a Deadly Pepper dropped in 1988. Kid and Play, Too Hype. Chubb Rock's debut album, self-titled album, also 1988, which is crazy. Mantronics in Full Effect, Steady B, Let the Hustlers Play. Curtis Blow was still rocking in 88 with Back by Popular Demand. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. 1988 was a good year for hip-hop. Enough said. I want to thank RollingStones.com, HipHopGoldenAge.com, the Maven.net, where I kind of made sure I covered all of these albums by, looking at what these people put down when they wrote their articles about it. You can follow me on social media, that being Twitter and Instagram. Vegas World INC is the tag, and Facebook is what you do. Facebook.com/hip-hop right now. Hit that like button. And also know that this podcast is available on your Android or Apple device or your laptop, whatever it may be. So that means you can find me in iTunes podcast. You can find me in Google Play Music. If you like independent apps like Stitcher Radio or Spreaker or Podbean or TuneIn, Hip Hop Now podcast is everywhere. But the hub, the place where it all is, SoundCloud.com/hiphopnow podcast. Until next time, y'all, I am not a critic, I'm a fan. Peace. Drop it on the random.